and said that he was going to course 200, 12 knots, and entering the southbound lane in order to avoid ice, which was presumably in the northbound lane. Or excuse me, he was going into the northbound lane to avoid ice because there was ice across the southbound lane and separation zone, and that he would call with a new ETA for Naked Island once he was clear of the ice. He also informed me of the two inbound vessels we had at the time.
Did you take a look at the radar that evening when you got on duty to see if you could see the Exxon Valdez?
Yes, according to Mr. Taylor, he said that he had lost contact with the Exxon Valdez on the radar.
Okay. Would you explain what you mean by that so the jury would understand what you understood that to mean?
I understood that to mean that the weather conditions and or some kind of equipment problems or whatever was affecting the situation at the time, probably mostly weather conditions. For that reason, he's no longer able to make contact with the vessel on radar.
Did you look to see if...
Yes, I did. I looked at the scope, and we weren't picking anything up.
What did you do then after that?
In terms of...
Well, what did you... It's 11...
Of the watch relief?
Yeah.
I believe Mr. Taylor, after we completed the watch relief, he gave me the situation on the ice, and he mentioned that the Arco Juno had gone out a few hours before that, and they had done, this is the same, basically the same maneuver that he told me that the Exxon Valdez was currently conducting, and that they had gone through there with no problem. And then we discussed what the ice was and various aspects of the relief, whether or not any of the equipment was down, which at that time it was. We had some communication sites inoperative. I believe it was Cape Pinchenbrook, and possibly Naked Island. VHF sites were inoperative. Then about 23:45, he left.
What did you do after he left?
Best I recall, I set the various pieces of paper that we keep the watch going on, set up in the way that I like to set them up, so I know where everybody is and where they're going to be, and I got it all pretty well straight in my mind as to what was happening. And after I had satisfied myself that I was familiar enough with what was going on, I went downstairs to get a cup of coffee, and I came back up and checked with the weather service, who was right next door to our traffic center, to see what the current weather conditions were like and what the forecast was. And then I went back into the traffic center. I'm not sure what time I arrived back in there. Probably took me a total of 5 minutes to do that, get coffee and come back in.
What did you do then, next?
Well, I'm sure I just sat there for a few minutes. And then right at midnight, I started my midnight chore routine.
Would you explain to the jury what that is?
Okay, we have to, first of all, the 24-hour tape recorder that we use, 40-channel tape recorder, has to be changed. The tape has to be changed at midnight. The old one rewound, or the one that has just finished recording, it has to be rewound, filed away. The heads have to be cleaned on the machine. You have to pull a used tape that's a month old off the shelf, use an eraser on it, bulk tape eraser, erase that, and install it on the reel that is, you've just removed the present day's, or the previous day's tape from. And at midnight, the other reel starts recording automatically, so you don't miss anything. One stops and the other one starts.
This 24-hour clock, is this an accurate?
Yes, it is. We take a time tick with WWB every day and compare it. And if it's more than 2 or 3 seconds off, we make sure it's corrected.
Did you receive any any radio communications then after you, during that time?
Any radio? No,
Communications.
none whatsoever.
When did you get your first communication?
As far as receiving any communications while I was gone, if I had not been there to take a radio call, the radioman would have answered it for me.
Oh, he remained in the room when you went to get a cup of
Yes, he did. And if there were something that he couldn't handle or something was pretty important, we have a system where he could get me back up there right away within 30 seconds.
Did he inform you of anything when you came back up to the...
I asked him when I came back if I'd had any calls. He said no.
Now, when was the first radio transmission that you actually received while you were on duty then?
I believe it was minute 17. I got a call from, I believe it was the Chevron California, who was inbound at Hinchinbrook.
Did you receive a call from the Exxon Valdez shortly thereafter?
Yes, I did.
What time was that?
I have it logged in the station log as being minute 0028. That time was, in fact, when I finished talking to him. I looked up and recorded the time. But when he initially called, according to the time that's recorded on the tape, was minute 0026 and so many seconds.
When you say 0026, for people that aren't familiar with a 24-hour time, what does that mean?
26 after midnight.
Now, who called you?
The Exxon Valdez.
And when he called you, what did he say?
He said that he was hard aground on Bly Reef and that he was leaking oil, and that he would, and he'd let me slow down a minute. He said he was hard aground on Bly Reef, and he gave me a position north of Goose Island, which I didn't really comprehend.
Where would you get that pointer there and show the jury where Goose Island is?
Do you have a 708 chart? This one's kind of small. That's better. This is Goose Island right here. And this is Bly Reef up here. It's about 8 to 10 miles away. But anyway, did you want me to continue?
Well, tell me, as best you remember, and if you need to refresh your recollection, tell me, but as best you remember, what did the person from the Exxon Valdez tell you?
Okay, that he was hard aground north of Goose Island on Bly Reef, and that he was leaking some oil, and that this was she's just reporting that.
Now, when you heard where he told you he was, where did you think that was?
Well, I had a little bit of difficulty because
Why did you have a difficulty?
because of the differences in position. Was he down here by Goose Island, or was he up here by Bly Reef? So after that, I shifted my radars to try to see if I could find him anywhere. And, of course, I can't see anything down here by Goose Island. It's in the shadow. All you can see is through this, be like a V-shaped area going straight down the arm. Anything that's behind this island here, I wouldn't be able to see. But I noticed a target up in this area that was way out of the traffic lanes, and approximately 90 degrees to the radar.
Now, what had the radar been on before when you looked at it first?
Okay. When I came in and relieved Mr. Taylor, the radar was on the 6-mile scale, offset to 10 miles.
Did you change it?
Yes, I did,
When did that happen?
at midnight.
Okay, and what did you change it to?
I changed to 3-mile scale to take the bearing range of Middle Rock for the midnight calibration of the radar.
And is that something that you'd go through every evening on your shift?
Right, it comes right after changing the tapes.
And when did you change the radar after that?
When he called,
And what did you change it to?
12-mile scale.
And were you getting a solid fix, or was it intermittent?
At that time, it was pretty solid.
And when you say it was, would you again describe the position of how the ship was laying at that time?
Okay, it was this aspect of the ship was broadside to the radar, or 90 degrees.
Maybe if you could use that marker there, right in front of you, right in front of you there.
Okay.
And on the map, or on the chart, excuse me, would you point out to the jury how the tanker was sitting?
It appeared to be sitting about like this.
And in your experience as a radar person, is it easier to pick up a tanker when it's sitting broadside to the radar or when it's sitting lengthwise?
Certainly when it's broadside,
Why is that?
because you have more target area.
After you pick this up, well, after the captain or the person told you that they were aground north of Goose Island, did you respond immediately to him?
Well, it took me it seemed like forever, but it took like maybe a minute for me to figure out what was going on. And I asked him, after I saw this contact here, which is not normally there, I asked him, are you about a mile north of Blauford-Coast. And he said yes.
Now, when you say a mile north of Blauford-Coast, would you point out to the jury where you were talking about?
Okay, this is the reef itself is right here. The ship is right here, and the buoy is right here, off to the west of the western edge of the reef.
What went through your mind when you heard this report?
Your Honor, I object. I think it's irrelevant.
It goes to his observations and how he acted after that.
And objection are ruled.
What went through your mind?
Well, I don't exactly recall, but I did a pretty hard swallow, and I don't know, I guess the old flight or fight instinct took in, and the adrenaline started pumping, and we really went to general quarters.
What did you do then after that?
I immediately called the commanding officer,
And who would that have been at the time?
Commander McCall.
And what did you tell him?
That this was the big one. The Exxon Valdez was on the rocks and leaking oil.
Okay. And who did you call after that?
Lieutenant Commander Falkenstein, and basically told him the same thing. And they both said that they would be right there, and they were about, I would say no longer than 5 minutes after they were on the station.
Now, did you ask the Exxon Valdez for a weather report?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
Mostly to be able to give the weather to any assisting resources, and or to be able to judge what kind of resources to send to assist the tanker.
Did you, when Commander McCall arrived, what happened?
When he arrived, he immediately called the ship and communicated with the master. I just handed him the radio, and he...
Would you describe for the jury what you did for the rest of that morning?
Well, it became pretty much if you will, a search and rescue case at the initial phase, trying to coordinate getting assistance out to the tanker. There were various arrangements that had to be made to try to line up the appropriate size hoses to lighter the fuel off, or excuse me, the cargo off, the remaining cargo. And it couldn't have been more than an hour after the grounding that the phones just literally started ringing off the wall. And we only had a very small watch section, which is normal, and it got to be pretty much to handle.
How long did you work that morning?
I stayed until 8, which was my regular end of shift, and then I stayed for an additional 4 hours to help out with with all the additional volumes of traffic that were coming in.
Mr. Cole, this would be a good time to take a break.